feel like lately there has been this incredible resurgence of women wanting to take back their birth experiences and know what it feels like to give birth naturally without any pain medications, and women who are questioning the status quo and not just going for your typical standardized hospital birth with an epidural. And if you clicked on this video, I want to affirm you in the fact that it is so possible, so doable, and so empowering, but at the same time, it's not the easiest thing in the world, as you probably have heard a million times over. So from point A of deciding that you want to give birth naturally to point B of actually getting there and doing the thing, there is a lot to learn and a lot to know. So in today's video, I am going to walk you through step by step what I wish I would have known that I needed to do to prepare to give birth naturally. And I also really wish I could have told every single mom I've encountered as a labor and delivery nurse and a doula that they need to do these things if they want to give birth without an epidural. So if you are trying to give birth naturally without an epidural, stick around to the end of this video because I'm going to tell you exactly how I would do it.
I feel so free, oh my sweet baby.
Hello, my friend. If we haven't met yet, my name is Eve. I am a birth doula, a former labor and delivery nurse, and a Catholic mama to two. I've had 2 natural unmedicated births myself, and I have supported a lot of women through every kind of birth experience, from unmedicated, like we're going to talk about today, to planned medicated epidural births, to unplanned medicated, to C-sections of every variety. I have seen a lot, and so this is a topic that absolutely lights me up because having had my own unmedicated births, I know just how empowering and incredible it can be, but also that you need the right support to get there. So I'm going to give you my exact roadmap of what I would do if I was preparing for an unmedicated birth starting today. Number 1, first thing that you want to do if you're planning an unmedicated birth is decide on your why. Now, this is going to look different for everybody. Some people are really afraid of needles, and the idea of getting an epidural stuck in their back actually scares them more than the idea of giving birth unmedicated. Some women firmly believe that their bodies were made to and capable of giving birth naturally, and so they don't want to mess around with routine medical intervention. Whatever your why is, you want to decide on it and then stay firm. And it should be something that's actually deeply meaningful to you. So for example, my why when I decided to give birth without medication was that women generations past in my family had done it. I knew that I was designed for it and capable of it, and I had seen a lot of experiences go south in my nursing job, and I didn't want my experience to look like that at all. So I had a list of firm, meaningful reasons why I wanted to give birth without pain medication. A why that looks like my friend did it, so I want to do it, or even a why that isn't solid, like I think I want this, but I don't really know, probably won't help you out very much when you are in the throes of the intensity of labor and needing kind of a firm landing place to fall back on, to remember why you're actually doing what you're doing. So first of all, decide why, and that should be a meaningful why to you. Number 2 is choose a provider and a setting after you have decided on your why and made a firm resolution to give birth unmedicated. Don't make the mistake that so many women make, and they choose, their sister's OBGYN they've been seeing their whole life, and then they decide that they want a natural birth. You should be choosing a provider who is not only going to be tolerant of your decision to have a natural birth, but deeply supportive of that decision. This is one of the most important things and most impactful things for your birth experience, is the kind of provider that you have and the setting that you give birth in. So you should decide on a natural birth first before your provider and not the other way around. Okay, number 3, once you have chosen your doctor or midwife or medical provider, you are going to want to choose other support people who are going to bring you through this process, who are going to be just that, super supportive of your decision. These should ideally be the people in your life that you lean on when you're in crisis situations and that you're deeply vulnerable with. Think about the people in your life you'd feel comfortable being naked around or sharing like your deepest, most raw emotional moments. You don't want strangers in your room or people who are going to stress you out. So that you have a family member who really wants to be there and they're being quite pushy and invasive about it, but you know that their presence isn't going to make you feel at ease. No to anybody anybody like that in your birth space. This is the time and place for you to have the most supportive, amazing team around you of people that build you up and make you feel totally comfortable being yourself. Piggybacking off of this point, I really think it is so wise for you to hire a doula, especially if you're a first-time mom or if you've never given birth unmedicated before, and especially if it's those things combined with the fact that you're birthing in a hospital. Women who have doula support consistently, statistically, have better outcomes and end up needing less intervention and less pain medication. So if you are committed to having a natural birth, definitely consider investing in a doula. Okay, now you're committed to this process, you have your support people and your team lined up and ready to go. Now you need to start educating yourself on the birth process. This is extremely important. I know way too many women who've decided, yeah, I want a natural birth, but I'm just gonna play it by ear, and they don't really educate themselves. A huge mistake. The more that you know about birth, the less you fear it. This is so important because fear is one of the #1 things behind provider that is going to disrupt you from having a positive natural birth experience. It is essential that you learn to recognize what is normal and what's not normal, both from an emotional standpoint and also from a physical standpoint. There are going to be a lot of sensations that you're feeling during labor that you probably have never felt before. And yes, that's physical, but it also is emotional. So you need to recognize that maybe when you feel like giving up or you feel like it is just too much, that this is actually a normal, healthy part of labor that can really help you cope through it. Also, when you know what to expect physically, then you're not stuck in your thinking brain and constantly trying to evaluate what's going on in your body. So that knowledge is going to carry you into labor without fear. If you want to know where to look, I have a birth course called the Wholly Confident Birth Course. I'm relaunching it in March and I'm super excited about it. It goes through everything that you could possibly want to know about the birth process, about having a God-centered natural birth. So I'll leave a link for the waitlist in the description of this video. Okay, so you've decided on a birth course to take, or a course of action at least, on how you're going to educate yourself about the birth process. Now it's time for you to train your brain into believing firmly that birth is normal. Birth is normal, okay? This is something that we were made to do. A lot of the time I see this weird, especially like with American women. I think that we've just been indoctrinated to believe that birth is a sickness, like it is a pathology, something that, you know, when you are pregnant and you're about to give birth and then you're in labor, it makes you like a patient, like a helpless, sick little girl. And it's just not true. This is the most powerful thing that we can do as women. Being pregnant and giving birth is a normal, healthy process, and your brain needs to believe that in order for you to not be afraid of it. So start surrounding yourself with positive birth stories, talking to other women who've given birth naturally and felt good about it. There is absolutely room for women who have felt birth trauma or who have given birth and not had a positive experience, and I never ever want to invalidate that. But if you are pregnant and you're preparing to give birth, period, but especially you're preparing to give birth naturally, this is not the time and place for you to be receiving that kind of information, or for other people to be, I don't even necessarily want to say trauma dumping, because I know that's not always the heart behind it, right? Some people just need a place to be vulnerable and share their own experience, even if it wasn't positive, but that can't be you right now if you're preparing to give birth. So protect your mental peace, do all the things you can to train your brain to believe that birth is a normal process, and that will help you not be so afraid of it, and it will really serve you well by the time you go into labor. Okay. Number 6, start coming up with a birth plan and thinking through your options. And then this is the kicker, choosing options that actually align with your desire to have a natural birth. There is this phenomenon, and honestly, I think it comes from women choosing not to educate themselves. There's this phenomenon where I'll hear women saying, yeah, I want to give birth naturally. I want to do this without an epidural. I don't want pain meds. But then when the rubber actually hits the road, the decisions they're making about their options and interventions do not align at all with their plan to have a natural birth. This is huge. If you are planning on giving birth without an epidural, you really probably don't want to agree to that elective 39-week induction that your provider hopefully isn't pushing on you, because hopefully you've got a really good supportive provider. But if you're in a situation where they're recommending an elective induction that's not medically necessary, well, okay, that doesn't really line up with the decision to want to give birth naturally. Or say that you've chosen to give birth in a hospital that you know is really intervention heavy and not supportive of natural birth. birth or doesn't have a lot of tools to help you cope. You just want to make sure that the decisions you're making in other areas align with your desire to have a natural birth, because if it's not, there's going to be this kind of like cognitive dissonance or a dissonance in the scenario that you're going to be put in when you actually go into labor and give birth, and one of those things has to win over the other. You don't want to be fighting battles when you're in labor, so make decisions aligned with your goals beforehand. This is super, super important. Okay, next. This is a little bit unconventional, but also very, very important. And it goes deeper than just making decisions surrounding your labor. This is that you really need to be comfortable in your life as a person, saying no and setting boundaries. I promise you, it is such a thing that intensely people-pleasing ladies do not usually have the best birth experience, because often they get stuck in this mental cycle where they're so afraid to say no, and they let their birth experience be ripped away from them just because they were scared to set those boundaries and make decisions for themselves. If you are a natural people pleaser, you just need to be aware of this and start practice setting firm boundaries and saying no and not feeling guilty about it. We have really been conditioned, especially as women. I don't really want to make it a gender thing, but I think it is true that as women, we've been conditioned to believe that saying no is a negative thing and that it's rude and selfish and unkind. But it's important for us to remember that the ultimate model of who we want to be in life, right? Jesus Christ, he said no and he set boundaries when things didn't align with his mission. He wasn't afraid to ruffle feathers or hurt people's feelings. Of course, he always acted lovingly, but you can still be loving and kind and learn how to say no and set boundaries. That will serve you so well if you can get in the habit and practice of doing it before you go into labor. Okay, so you've been pregnant, you've done all of these things, now you're getting ready to meet your baby, you're approaching your due date, you want to know about the nitty-gritty of when you actually go into labor. What do you do? First of all, let labor start on its own. I just have to be the bearer of bad news and let you know that an induction, like a medical induction, especially when there's no real medical reason, is not going to set you up for a natural birth. It is possible to be induced and give birth without pain medication, but it is very challenging. I swear to you, those women are the exception, not the norm. So if you want a natural birth, let labor begin on its own, unless there's some kind of really clear medical indication that makes it unsafe for you or your baby for you to continue being pregnant. Okay, so you're pregnant, you have been very patient probably up to this point, not choosing to have an elective induction, still waiting on your baby's timing, and then you get hit with the contractions, and then labor starts. It's the moment you've been waiting for. Now what do you need to do? So you start noticing regular contractions. They're maybe picking up in intensity. This is labor. What I want you to make sure that you do is, if it's early labor, and especially if this is your first baby, rest as long as possible and ignore it as long as possible. I think I've said this already in this video, but you do not want to be in your thinking brain while you're laboring. This is just not the time or place for you to be analyzing every little thing or fighting battles in your head. So relax, rest, ignore your contractions until you just can't anymore. Now, once your contractions are just too hard to brush off and ignore and you really have to do something to keep coping through them, make sure that you are utilizing movement. Do not make the mistake that so many women do and just, this usually happens in a hospital, but do not make the mistake that so many women do and just crawl into bed and lay flat on your back all the meanwhile you're having these contractions. Use movement to help you cope. Not only is it going to help you cope with the contractions when they start to pick up in intensity, but it's also going to help you have a faster, easier labor, as your movements on the outside help baby navigate their way through the pelvis on the inside. Movement is absolutely crucial, and you should probably be doing this still at home if you're not like in the throes of active labor yet. Another point off of that one is that I want you to avoid getting to your birth location too early. Now, if you are giving birth in a birth center, it's going to be a little bit safer for you to get there on the early side because they usually have a lot of tools to help you cope and things like that, but especially if you're giving birth at the hospital. Do not go too early. Wait out early labor at home. Make sure that you're balancing rest and movement and just not thinking too hard about labor. You're gonna wanna wait to leave for your birth location until you are in active labor. Next tip. do not rely too heavily on cervical exams to tell you where you are in labor. In fact, if I was in your position and preparing to give birth naturally again, I would just opt to not have cervical exams really at all. Yes, it is possible to give birth without a single cervical check. If you do require one or you decide that you want one, I would just, okay, it's very tempting to want to know where you are, but if you do require one or you just want to get one, don't have them tell you the number. That number, I promise you, regardless what it is gonna get in your head. If it is 3 centimeters and you've been laboring all day and night, it will exhaust you and make you feel like you can't do it, when maybe if you kept going, you'd have your baby there in 6 hours. Conversely, if it is 8 centimeters, it's going to make you feel like, this is awesome, my baby's gonna be here so soon, but you actually don't know that. Labor is very unpredictable, and a cervical exam can only tell you what's happening in this exact moment with your body. It is not a crystal ball. It cannot tell you the future of your labor. So if you want a natural birth, I would just say opt out of them entirely, but if you can't opt out, don't have them tell you the number. Next tip is agree to as few medical interventions as possible for you to safely give birth. Now, what you should and shouldn't agree to is obviously going to be unique to your individual situation, and I can't tell you what that is, but if you can opt for the most minimal amount of intervention possible, that is going to be the most supportive of a natural, undisturbed birth experience. Too many first-time moms especially agree to all the interventions under the sun, and this kind of goes back to my point about making decisions that are aligned with your goals. Don't decide, yeah, I want to get all the interventions except the epidural, because birth just doesn't really work like that, and that's not going to set you up for success. So if you want a natural birth, try to opt out of all of the interventions as much as you can. Okay, my very last tip is wait until you feel the urge to push to start pushing. I talked about this in my last video where I talked about the difference between coached and physiologic pushing and how to push out your baby for a much faster, easier birth. So if you want to check that out, I will link it up here. But make sure that you wait until you actually feel that uncontrollable urge to push to start pushing, because otherwise you might exhaust yourself or lead yourself down that cascade of interventions. All in all, what I really want you to know is that your body is capable of doing this. It was made to do this, and you don't need to rely too heavily on outsourcing all of the things in order for your body to be capable of giving birth. You are capable of giving birth in and of yourself. The most assured way that you can actually achieve your goal of giving birth without an epidural is letting your birth unfold as much as possible undisturbed. In short, have good support people, make sure that you're well informed and well equipped, and listen to your body and your intuition, and you are going to do just fine. Again, I just want to reiterate to you that this is so doable and so possible and can be one of the most empowering, amazing experiences of your life. So if you're preparing to give birth without an epidural, please know I'm praying for you. You've got this. And if you have any questions for me, go ahead and pop them in the comments below. I would love to address them. I'm also going to link a free resource for you in the description of this video. It is the free labor positions guide that I put out, and that's going to help you work with your body rather than against it, and it addresses all sorts of things like what to do if your labor stalls, common questions about baby positioning, and all of those things. So I think that that's a really valuable and helpful resource for you. You can grab that down there. Alrighty, my friend, thank you so much for being here this week. Like I said, be assured of my prayers for you, and I will see you back here next time.